Hello friends, I am Lakshmi Padmanabhan. Welcome to Gandhi Hacks in South Africa. Before I start the episode, let me thank you viewers who were very responsive to my first episode. I am infinitely grateful to you. Please continue to support me. Please subscribe, like and share. Now to this episode, it deals with the question that must be uppermost in the minds of some at least of my viewers who have not read this Gandhi story, and that is, what took Gandhi to South Africa? The most important part of it was a legal issue that took him there, and then I would also be speaking about some of the things that were there in the background before he went to South Africa, what made the South African offer a very tempting thing, and also a little bit of the case, the details of the case, and then how he went to South Africa. Now, I already mentioned that it was a legal issue that took him there. Before that, what was the condition in which Mohandas Gandhi was at that time? That is in 1893. 1891, Gandhi returned from England. He had his barrister's degree, and he thought of establishing a legal practice in Mumbai. He wanted to shine as a barrister, but all these attempts were in vain. He could not shine as a barrister. In fact, the very first case that he took up was a big flop. He stood up in the High Court, Bombay High Court. He could not utter a single word. He had to sit down, pass the case on to another ordinary lawyer who did it with absolute ease. Then the next thing that he could do was drafting memorials and testimonials and affidavits, etc., such detailed documents. He had become an expert in writing. If you go back to his days in England as a student, you would recall that he had some practice of writing for a magazine called The Vegetarian. So he was very good at his writing, was very good at English. So these legal documents he could write, but and then income also he could be sure of, but that wasn't anything that he had been dreaming about. So he packed up and went back to Rajkot, where his brother had an office. His brother Lakshmi Das, he also had some contacts there. There was some hope of his getting some cases there, and even if the cases did not come, he could continue writing these testimonials, memorials, etc. So he was there in Rajkot. Of course, these cases came, legal document writing, and he was able to make a good income out of it. He could just get by with all these things, but that was not exciting at all. Remember, he had spent 3 years in England. He had seen the world, and he was hoping for very exciting, very adventurous types of engagement, and this was what he was, left with in India, in Rajkot. In a very dull mood he was. Now, to add to that, there was another very embarrassing thing that happened in their lives, and partly caused by his brother Lakshmi Das. Lakshmi Das was something of a guardian at that time, because they had lost their father. Lakshmi Das was the secretary of the late ruler of Porbandar by name Bhav Singh, when he was an heir apparent. That is, when Bhav Singh was an heir apparent, the next to the throne, Lakshmi Das was his friend and his secretary and assistant and all that. Now, this Bhav Singh did a very indiscreet thing in his days as a young man, and that was spiriting away some jewels from the state treasury. Though he was the prince, he was the heir apparent, he did not have the right to the property of the state according to the British. The British were tightening their hold on India. At that time, there were these princely states. The princes were allowed to rule, kings were allowed to rule, but the actual control, the reign, was in the hands of these British agents. They were called the British agents. Immensely powerful they were. And at that point, the British agent was a man called Charles Oliphant. So he could not punish Bhav Singh because he was the heir apparent. He had some power there. So he punished his assistant, that is Lakshmi Das Gandhi. He lost his job. Lakshmi Das lost his job. It was in that condition that Mohandas Gandhi found him when he returned from England. Lakshmi Das was in a spot. And in the casual conversation about England and the life he had there, Mohandas had mentioned that he had met Charles Oliphant there in England. And Oliphant was very pleasant with him. They were somewhat friendly. Now, Lakshmi Das latched on to this bit of conversation, this bit of the story, and Lakshmi Das wanted his brother to speak up for him with Charles Oliphant, the British agent. Mohandas Gandhi did not like this assignment at all. He knew that it was very irregular on his part to make use of a personal acquaintance or a friendship for the sake of rescuing his brother from a highly doubtful, suspicious kind of involvement. But he was forced to do it because Lakshmi Das played the other card. See, after all, I did help you to go to England. Don't forget that I had to go through a lot of sacrifice to raise the money for you to continue in England and have some thought of the family and things of that kind. So Mohandas Gandhi was persuaded. He was forced to approach Oliphant with this recommendation to reinstate his brother in some capacity in the state. Now he went to Oliphant. Oliphant was absolutely rude. He did not entertain any sort of talk from Gandhi. He insulted Mohandas Gandhi. In fact, asked his attendant, his peon, to physically remove him from the office. Now the angry young man, Mohandas Gandhi, barrister at law from England, he was very angry with this. He resented this incident. He said, "I would see you in court," and walked out of that office. But later on, he found out from the advice of elders, other lawyers, prominent lawyers, etc., that no case against an Englishman would ever be successful. Better you forget about it, you just bury it in your memory and don't proceed with it. So he was forced to keep quiet about it, and he was actually smoldering within him, full of anger against this kind of power. Though he knew that he himself was not all that justified in going to this official with that recommendation. So it was all very, very unpleasant for Mohandas Gandhi. The days became very, very unpleasant because this Oliphant was a powerful person in Porbandar. So any sort of career advancement that Gandhi wanted would not take place because he had locked horns with this fellow. So the idea behind going to England and studying law there, becoming a barrister, was to occupy some very high position back home in India, to become a diwan as his father was. Now his father could become a diwan in spite of the fact that he did not have an English education, but those days were different. English education was not an absolute must. Other forms of knowledge and experience were enough, but times had changed. Now they insisted on the English education. That is why Gandhi was sent to England. But now all such hopes were dashed with this case and this involvement with the high official. It was in this desperate situation that a miracle happened. A letter came to Lakshmi Das Gandhi from Dada, Abdulla and Sons, a big company based in South Africa. The letter actually was a job offer for Mohandas Gandhi. This firm, that is Dada Abdulla and Sons, were fighting a legal battle with another person. Dada Abdulla was fighting a legal battle with Tayyib Khan Muhammad in South Africa. So they needed a lawyer to help them with this case. Now, something about the case itself, the details of the case. Dada Abdulla and Tayyib Khan Muhammad, they were actually cousins, relatives. Dada Abdulla had several companies in Natal, in the Transvaal, as well as in Portuguese territory in Africa. Of these, some 7 companies were looked after by Tayyib Khan's family, and at a certain stage they bought the companies from him. The branches were bought, and the payment was to be done in installments. Initially the installments came, but at a certain point, that is 1893, it stopped. In 1892 the payment stopped. So Dada Abdulla and Sons sued Tayyib Khan for the payment of the sum with interest added on. So that was the case. Now, Abdullah Sheikh had actually engaged British lawyers, English lawyers. Problem was, Abdullah's records were all in Gujarati. So he needed someone who knew both the languages, that is Gujarati and English. And Mohandas Gandhi was a perfect fit. Hence this offer of the job. And the promises were free passage, free first class passage to South Africa and back, return passage, and free board and lodging there, and a payment of £105. The contract was for a year. So this was the offer. It was an irresistible offer for Mohandas Gandhi because of the circumstances which I had detailed earlier. He was waiting to escape, to run away from Rajkot, Porbandar, from the whole of India, because where all this type of intrigue was going on, where the British were ruling over everybody in this manner. And he was in a kind of corner at that time. So he welcomed this idea of going to South Africa on this mission. The only problem was, again, separation from his family. Remember, Mohandas Gandhi was married. He got married at the age of 13, if you would recall the earlier episodes. So now he was in his early 20s. He already had 2 sons. The second son was born during his return, this period when he was in India. So Harilal and Manilal were already there, and he was enjoying the company of his sons and the nephews. And even to Kasturba he was getting closer, in spite of some of the tiffs they had in the beginning. So that was a worrisome point in this offer, and Kasturba also was unhappy about this, but he consoled her with the thought that it is after all only for a year. So I will be back in a year, and then we can be together. So the offer was accepted, and Gandhi set sail for South Africa in 1893 and reached Durban by the end of May. So it took a whole month in those days to reach from India to South Africa. Durban was the port city and a very important city. Right on landing itself, Mohandas Gandhi could see the extreme contempt in which the Europeans, the English particularly, were treating the Indians. Abdullah Sheikh himself was being treated as a subordinate, as a subaltern, in spite of the fact that he was quite a wealthy merchant there. He was a little upset by these sights, though Abdullah himself was not disturbed because he was used to it. Mohandas was taken to the room next to Abdullah Sheikh's in the company's quarters. Now, these two people, that is Abdulla Sheikh and Mohandas Gandhi, made an odd pair. Abdulla Sheikh, much older, experienced man, but he had no English education. And here was this young man, Mohandas Gandhi, freshly returned from England. Pakka English ways he had. He was dressed like an Englishman, except for a turban that he wore on his head. Now, note this turban. The turban has many things associated with it. We'll be coming across in the story. So first, Abdulla Sheikh did not know what to do with this young man. He could not make out, how to deal with him. He looked high maintenance. You know what that means? It's expensive to maintain this fellow. What job can I give him directly? He cannot be sent directly to handle the case because the case was in Pretoria, that is the capital of the Transvaal. So no summons had come so far from the court. So what shall I do with him? How shall I make him spend time here? I am reminded of Tagore's story, wherein there is this character called Fatik Chakravarti. Of course, he was quite a young boy, teenager, at a loose end, like in a new place. So will Mohandas find himself at a loose end here in my place? All these doubts were troubling Abdulla Sheikh. But by then the call came from Pretoria that the Sheikh should send someone to the court. And so he was relieved. He could send this chap to Pretoria to represent him in the court. Dada Abdulla had very deep knowledge of his religion, that is Islam. Gandhi could get a lot of information about that religion from him, and a sort of bond developed between them, though initially there was that strangeness. So Abdulla Sheikh took him to the magistrate's court in Durban, introduced him to the attorneys there, made him sit next to the attorney, and the magistrates looked at Gandhi. His eyes went straight to the turban, something odd there, and magistrate asked him to remove the turban. Now Mohandas Gandhi refused to remove the turban and he left the court. Abdulla Sheikh explained to Mohandas that in the court in Durban, Mussalmans are allowed to wear the turban. People from other communities, other Indians, should not wear the turban. That was the practice in the court. Now, this was sensational news for the newspapers. Mohandas Gandhi became an instant celebrity. This defiance of the magistrate's order, was made much of. So Gandhi at that point thought that he would change his habit of wearing the turban. Told Abdulla Sheikh, I wouldn't wear this turban, I would wear a hat. Then Abdulla Sheikh said, no, don't wear a hat. The turban suits you. Another thing, if you wear a hat, you would be taken for a waiter. The indentured laborers consisted of Hindus, Muslims, and Christians. And the Christians were all converted Christians. They followed the dress style of the Englishmen. They wore hats, but they were employed only as waiters in hotels. And that was a low profile job. So Abdulla Sheikh did not want this barrister to be taken to be a waiter. That is why he prohibited the use of the hat. Now, the turban story, make a note of it. It is continued. At this point, he refuses to take the hat off. Take the turban off. It is something of his habit of saying no to authority. This was the appropriate starting point for Mohandas Gandhi's life in South Africa. One very interesting fact about Gandhi's life is the integral connection between what he wore, the clothes he wore, the style he followed, and what he did. There was an integral connection between his activities and his dress. You find him changing his style of dressing according to the context in which he finds himself, according to the role that he finds himself playing in his public life. Very interesting to follow this. Now it begins with this turban story. Then later on you find him dressing like a Parsi. Much later you find him dressing like an indentured laborer. And then he comes to India, you find him in the loincloth, and that was the dress with which he stuck till the end of his days. This is a unique example of a leader who made use of clothes to make loud statements, whether it was to raise awareness about the economy, as in the case of Khadi, for example, and independence, or whether it was to create a bond between himself and the poor masses of India, as it happened in the case of the loincloth. So that is something so very, very outstanding about Mahatma Gandhi. So this episode ends here. Thank you very much for being patiently listening to me. Shall see you in South Africa with Gandhi. What he does next will be in the next episode. Please subscribe, like and share. Thank you.